Let me start by apologising for the break in transmission, for want of a better term. As you can probably hear, I have been and remain unwell, so I haven't been able to do the vocal recording that I was hoping to do, and we're going to have to wait until I get better before I can do that. However, I can show and talk about the two headphones that I picked up recently. I think it's easier if I show them to that camera. In my left hand are the Tascam TH200X. They were somewhere shy of £50. I think 40 odd quid, maybe not even as much as 45. I don't remember, to be honest with you. I bought them so that I could use them for DJing purposes. They are closed back headphones. They have a bit of a twist in them, but they don't really have much in terms of articulation. However, on the head, they do sit quite comfortably, so I don't really have an issue with them in terms of how they fit. The lead that comes with them is built in to the headphone. You can't unplug it, you can't separate it, you can't change it. Having said that, what I like about it is it's very long and it's a straight cable. I know that some DJs and DJ schools will tell you that you're better off with coiled cable headphones, but I find that coiled cables tend to get messed up quite quickly. Straight ones are just easier to wrap away. But the length of it impresses me because it means that I'll be able to, for example, dig around in my record crate without having to detach myself from the mixer or i.e. by taking off my headphones or whatever. So if I've got a crate of records behind me, which would be a typical situation, I can turn around and dig through it without being disconnected from my DJ set. And it just makes life a bit easier. You don't have to keep taking your headphones off and then turning around and digging through your records and then putting your headphones back on and all the rest of it. You can just move. This is my preference when it comes to DJing. So I didn't know that they were going to be like this because the description from the place I bought them, which I believe was Amazon, wasn't particularly descriptive, to be honest with you, but turned out to be an added bonus. The wire itself is a bit thin, and in a busy booth it could get damaged, but for the price of them, especially when you consider the actual sound quality of them, it's really not bad at all. I think it's a bit of a bargain, actually. Just plugging them back in where I had them, which is in one of the outputs on my HP6 headphone amp, which I've shown you before. In fact, while I'm on that subject, let me just clarify something. I did show you it briefly while I was doing a quick video of what's in my racks on either side of the desk here. And I think I described it as a 12-in, 12-out headphone amp, which technically it is, but what it is, there are actually 6 stereo inputs. And by that, I mean there are 2 balanced inputs, one for left and one for right. But obviously, if you only plug into the left one, you're only going to get the left-hand signal of whatever it is that you're sending to the headphone amp. So technically, it's only 6 inputs, but they're 6 balanced stereo inputs, which is why there's actually 12 physical inputs on the back of the unit. And on the front of the unit, there are 12 outputs, but they are also in bunches of 2. So there are 6 volume controls, and each volume control has control over a pair of headphone outputs, which obviously are unbalanced because they are headphone outputs as opposed to stereo inputs. So physically, the connector would be the same, but in practice, the signal that comes out of it is an unbalanced signal because it's the 2 signals that come into the back of the unit both feed each of the 2 outputs on the front of the unit. So the signal coming into the back, provided it's coming from a balanced output in the first place, is a balanced input, but the signal coming out of the front of the unit are two unbalanced stereo outputs, which obviously is what you would use for a headphone connection. So just so that there's some clarity in that, it's called the HP6 because it has 6 sets of controls and 6 sets of inputs. Although when you're talking about actual physical connections, there's 12 on the back and 12 on the front, which is why I said 12 in, 12 out, but it isn't, technically speaking, it's 6 stereo in to 12 stereo out, 6 balanced stereo ins to 12 unbalanced stereo outs. Okay, I hope that's cleared that up. Anyway, getting back on topic. So these headphones, they came approximately a week and a half after I received the other pair, which I showed you in my previous video. These I got from Thomann rather than Amazon, and they are the Austrian audio Hi-X15s. And I purchased these to use for tracking in the studio. They are also closed back headphones. They also fit very comfortably on the head. They have much more articulation. They feel, although the material, it feels like plastic, and it probably is plastic, there is metal in there as well. There's metal in the band, in the headband. I believe that bit is plastic, but it's quite sturdy plastic. For the price I paid for them, which was north of £200, I was expecting a bit more in terms of build quality, to be perfectly honest. I'm not saying the materials are cheap, because they probably aren't. And to get this red bit of plastic molding in that shape, and it feels quite strong and sturdy, I suspect that cost a bit of money. So I'm not saying that they're not worth the money that I paid for them, but it was a lot of money for a pair of headphones, in my opinion. Now, I do know that there are headphones that cost north of £2,000. So from that perspective, these are quite cheap. But even if I had it, I really can't see me spending £2,000 on a pair of headphones. I really can't. I'll probably pay more than double that for a good pair of studio monitors. If I had it, I'd be happy to pay 5-10 grand for a good pair of studio monitors in a proper studio setting. But when you're going up anywhere above £300 or more for headphones, maybe if I only exclusively mixed with headphones, then that obviously would be a different story. But because I only really use them, in this case for tracking, or in the case of my HD650s, I use these for check-in mixes. These are open-backed headphones, of course, which is why I couldn't do the vocal recording before, because obviously the sound would leak straight out of these. And I need to replace my broken Audio-Technica ATH-M50Xs. I think I misnamed them the last time round as well. It's ATH-M50X. And I've had them, I bought those and the Sennheisers at exactly the same time. And the Sennheisers have survived simply because I barely use them. And I barely use them because I use my monitors to mix rather than anything else. So, not sure what happened to okay, I think the other camera's gone out. Yeah, so anyway, basically, I would normally, if I was going to mix on headphones, it would be the HD650s. So literally the only reason I've got these is for tracking. And there's no way I'm going to spend more than £300 on a pair of tracking headphones, or even for mixing headphones. Maybe for mixing headphones, like I said, if they were literally the only thing that I used, then fair enough, £500-600 would be a reasonable investment, provided, of course, that they gave the quality that £500-600, it would have to be value for money, in my opinion. If I'm going to spend that much money on a pair of headphones, it would have to be some serious value for money. So even spending more than £200 on these isn't something that I would normally do, and I wouldn't say that I've got buyer's remorse or anything like that, because these are really good headphones. If we get into, and obviously this is something that's difficult to describe because everyone's hearing is different and everyone's expectations of what they're hearing is different. So it's very subjective is what I'm trying to say. And I like the sound that I get from these headphones, but I was surprised, especially because they are closed back headphones, at the lack of low frequencies that they give, especially compared to my previous headphones, the ATH-M50Xs, and even in comparison to these Tascam TH200Xs. Now, these are described as studio headphones. In fact, let me get the box. So this is the box for the Tascam headphones. There's not much to it. It's just some cheap cardboard. And there's an included data sheet, I suppose. Safety instructions, warranty, which is United States only, and specifications right in a small section right at the bottom here, which basically says that they're closed, dynamic, they have a sensitivity of 95 dB, plus or minus 3 dB. Their frequency response is 15 hertz to 22 hertz, a maximum power of 400 milliwatts, and that's basically it. And a bit of plastic that was wrapped around. As you can see, I still haven't snipped because I have to cut it off. That's the only other thing. This bit of plastic that's around the headband, obviously it won't slide over the air pieces, so I will have to cut it off. And I haven't done that yet because I just basically haven't got round to it. And I don't want to damage the headband either. So I'm going to be careful to do that. But yeah, so that's it. So they're cheap headphones. They came in a cheap package, a bit more plastic than we would like in this day and age. But other than that, not particularly bad. And as I said, they've described themselves as studio headphones. The Austrian Audio, on the other hand, they describe themselves as professional closed-back over-ear headphones. The package is much more, I mean, it's still cardboard, but it's much more sleek with this little Velcro thing that holds it together. And then it opens like a book. Et voila. Now, there is some single-use plastic in here as well. I don't remember there being a booklet with it. There may have been, and probably, well, actually, there was definitely something because I remember taking it out and putting it somewhere, but where I've put it now, I don't remember. So it's a bit of a fancier package. However, the other thing about these Austrian Audios, that's the length of the lead. I've had to, as you can see, plug it into a headphone extension lead in order for it to be usable in my situation. Without the extension lead, it's not quite the span of my arm length. The cable is detachable, and I suspect that if I was to check the Austrian Audio website, I would be able to get a replacement cable, perhaps even a longer replacement cable. I don't know, I'd have to check it. It kind of snaps into place. So there's no screwing or, cross threads or anything like that. It just snaps into place. And like the Tascam, it comes with its own 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch adapter. But this, as good as it sounds, and it does sound very good, not quite, for me, as good as the Sennheisers, but definitely better than the Audio Technicas that it replaced. But as I mentioned, I think I mentioned, the bass extension on these things is not, there isn't any, basically. Not that you can't hear any bass, but it's not very pronounced, which, like I said, surprised me, especially because they are closed-back headphones. Like I said, they're very comfortable closed-back headphones, and I think the depth of the pads may have something to do with the lack of bass. If we compare their air cups, you can see that the padding on the Tascam isn't quite as deep as the padding on the Austrian audios. And if you look at it, I don't know if it shows up well on camera, but with the Tascams, there's like a thin layer of material which is covering the driver. Very thin layer of material that's covering the driver. So the space between the side of your head and the driver is literally only the depth of the pads, which, as you can see, are squishy. So when you put it on, it will squish in a bit. Not too much, but it will squish in a bit, which makes that depth even shorter. So in other words, the drivers in these are much closer to your ears than the drivers in these. Because not only have you got thicker pads to begin with, see where the L and R are written, that material, just by feeling it, is probably a good eighth or more of an inch deep before you touch the surface of the drivers inside. So the drivers in these are much further away from your ears than the drivers in these, which may account for there being less bass because of the, obviously, as I get closer to the mic, my voice will sound bassier because of the proximity effect. And seeing as microphones and speakers are transducers, it stands to reason, therefore, that the same will be true in the opposite direction. In other words, from the headphones to your ears, the closer they are, the more bass you will pick up because of the proximity effect. So I suspect that that's why I'm not hearing as much bass in these. What I do hear, the frequencies I do hear in these, are very clear. There is a level of clarity in these headphones which makes them very useful. Like I said, they're not quite at the same level as the Sennheisers, but they are approaching it. And considering that these are closed-back headphones, I think that that is high praise indeed. So they kind of worth the money from that perspective. But having said that, though, I don't mix in headphones. Unless I had to, I wouldn't mix in headphones. If I've given the choice between headphones and speakers, I will always go with the speaker. So getting back to the length of the lead, I found this to be disappointing. Like I said, I will check, because I haven't done that yet, I will check the Austrian audio website to see if they do an extended lead, which I can replace this one, which would eliminate one of my gripes. Although having said that, having to pay extra for something which in my mind should have been there in the first place is, because even the ATH-M50Xs also had detachable cable, and it came with two, one curled and one straight, and they were both at least twice the length of this one. So it's not like it is unprecedented amongst headphone manufacturers to provide something that is of a useful length. Obviously, once you've got these on your head, there isn't much in terms of, if I was to stand up and try and do something behind me, I've got my DJ gear behind me, for example. If I was to stand up and say I was, which is not unknown for me, say I was transferring vinyl to digital, I'd put the record on behind me and then come back here to set up the project and do the recording, etc., etc. If I had to do it late at night, which wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility, and I didn't want to disturb my neighbors or anyone else in the house, then I would use headphones to do it. Now, of course, I can and would, in most situations, use my Sennheisers, because although they're open back, in that situation, there wouldn't be a lot of noise coming out of them, certainly not enough to disturb the neighbors or anyone else in the house. And they have a reasonably long lead as well, although in that case, like the Tascam, it's actually attached. There's no swapping of leads as far as the Sennheiser. So yeah, so before I give them too much of a negative on the length of the lead, I should really investigate whether they do a longer lead. But having said that, though, I'm sure if that is the case, I would have to pay extra for the lead, and then obviously to have it delivered or find somewhere that stocked it and go and pick it up. But yeah, that to me was a bit of a disappointment. The lack of bass I also found initially to be a bit of a disappointment. But having said that, though, once they broke in and I was listening to music on them, it wasn't an unpleasant experience. It was just, I was very surprised by the lack of bass. Anyway, I'm going to plug them back into the headphone extension. So currently both of these headphones are plugged in, as I was talking about my HP6 headphone amplifier, they're plugged into, as I said, each one of the 6 volume controls on the front of the headphone amplifier controls 2 sets of outputs, and these are connected to 2 outputs from the same headphone amplifier. I mentioned headphone amplifier because on the back, you can, like I said, there are 6 stereo inputs, and the way it works, the way it's wired, is that stereo input 1 goes to outputs 1 and 2 on the front. Stereo input 2 goes directly to outputs 3 and 4 on the front, and so on and so forth. However, if you stick something in stereo input 1 and don't put anything else into any of the other inputs on the back, then whatever is being fed into stereo input 1 can be picked up from all of the 12 outputs on the front. It's only when you break the circuit, so to speak, it's kind of patch bay-like in that sense. So you can put something into any of the inputs and it will feed all of the outputs directly connected to it and everything past it. So presently I have something in input 1 and something in input 4. So everything from 1, so on the front, everything from 1 to 6 is receiving one stereo signal, which I believe is from the headphone output on my mixing desk, and everything else from 7 to 12 is receiving the input from one of the headphone outputs on my Audion Nero. So in conclusion, the Tascams punch well above their weight. I bought them to use for DJing, but because the sound quality is quite good and the bass extension is what I would expect from a pair of closed back headphones, although having said that, it's not as much as was in the ATH M50Xs. So in that sense, they're actually a bit better than the ATH M50Xs, which cost 3 times as much as they did. And the Austrian audios cost 5 times as much as they did. But I would be happy to use either of these for a tracking situation, which is what I bought them for. Well, which is what I bought the Austrian audios for. But as it turns out, the latest AES in New York, which I believe is moving somewhere else next year, but at the last AES, Austrian Audio announced the Hi-X15s, which apparently were specifically made to be tracking headphones. So I probably should have waited, excuse me, and ordered those instead. And I may, if I get the money at some stage, order a pair anyway. And then they will probably be the best of both the Tascams and the Hi-X15s rolled into one. When it comes to tracking, different people, different artists, different performers have different tastes in terms of what they want to hear, not just more me, but in terms of the actual frequencies that they hear as well. Some people like bass in the backing track to whatever it is that they're recording over. Others might find it a bit distracting. So to have different types of closed back headphones available is always a bonus. I'm going to rock with both of these in terms of tracking going forward. But like I said, when I get out and DJ, which isn't that much these days, I've got to be honest with you. But when I do, then I wouldn't be taking the Austrian audios with me. I'd be taking the Tascams. Not only because they're cheaper and therefore I'd be less pissed off if something happened to them, but also because they give better bass extension and they have a very, well, not very long, but certainly a long enough lead that I can scoot around the DJ area without having to disconnect myself. In conclusion, I'm happy with both of them. I would definitely, in fact, I might even buy another pair of the Tascams just to have as a spare pair, because they're not as terrible as you might expect from something so cheap. They really aren't. I think they're pretty good value for money, actually. At some point down the line, I'll probably get another pair of those. And when I can afford it, I'll pick up a pair of the Hi-X20s as well. But as you can hear from my voice and the coughing and what have you, I'm in no fit state to be doing the vocal recordings right now. Excuse me. So the continuation of the test of the Camden EC2 by Cranbourne Audio is going to have to wait. Apologies, but it is what it is. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time or not. And either way, I hope you do something that makes you happy and healthy.